What do you do if you pull into a campground and your RV doesn't have power? Or if you have a 30 amp RV and you want more power inside? Or what about if you have a 50 amp RV and there's only 30 amp service available? Stick around because I'm going to answer all these questions and more. This video is designed for RV owners to troubleshoot common RV issues and for RV parks and campgrounds to share with their guests. Feel free to share this video. You don't need my permission for that. And you can jump around in the video to different sections by looking at the timestamps in the description. So to start off with, let me show you the proper way to plug into a pedestal. The first thing to do is inspect the outlets. So whether you're using a 50 amp or 30 amp, look at that outlet to make sure it's not melted. If you see this plastic melted on there, that means the connection inside of there has damage in it, so contact the RV park immediately. Don't plug into one that's melted. Then we'll look at the circuit breakers. You want to make sure all the circuit breakers are in off position before you start. So this one's labeled on is up, and if we flip these up, you'll see below there, off is that direction. So make sure they're all pointed towards the off direction. Now that our pedestal looks like it's safe to plug into, what you can do, if you have a surge protector, don't plug your RV cord into it yet. Just plug this into the pedestal. Now our breaker is off. Plug in, we're secure. We'll turn our breaker on for that 50 amp outlet. Plug your surge protector to determine if the power is safe. So on the Watchdog, the face of it would be white. If it had an issue, it would be red, and you'd see an error code here. So now we can turn that circuit breaker back off up here. Now we can plug our RV into the surge protector. So plug the one end into your RV, run your cord over to your pedestal, and again, with our RV power cord, we'll inspect it. So you're looking for things that are melted or black or dirty. So everything on this one is clean. Connections are pretty shiny. I'll put a picture on the screen of one that is bad and you don't want to see. Then once you determine your power cord is good, we'll take a look at the surge protector outlet to make sure that is not damaged as well. So looking in there, this one is brand new, so we won't see any damage in there. But just like any outlet, make sure things look like they're new and in good shape. Now that we've determined our connections are good, we'll plug our cord into our surge protector. The other end is already plugged into the RV. Make sure it's all the way tight and flat inside there. And if you don't have a surge protector, you'll plug your power cord directly into the power pedestal. And always make sure your cord is tight. Sometimes when you plug it in, you pull your cord around, you end up pulling it loose a little bit. So make sure that's all the way in there and tight, and then turn on the circuit breaker. So our 50 amp breaker is now on. Watchdog takes a couple seconds. It reads the power in there, and then we send power through the RV. If you have a surge protector that's not a Watchdog, one with lights on it, some of those will show right on the front of it. It'll have a little chart, and you can read the lights on it. That way you can determine if the power is good if you don't have something like a Watchdog. Now, power is turned on. We should have power inside of the RV. We can go inside to make sure everything works. Now, what do you do if you're plugged in correctly, but you still don't have power inside of the RV? Let me take you over to a different setup and walk you through troubleshooting that. Now we're over here in a tighter filming space. So if we don't have power inside, we will look at our surge protector first. I can see this is white. It probably doesn't come across in the camera very well, but I know the surge protector says we're good. So next thing to look at, sometimes your power cord has LED lights on it. Now you can't really see them the way this angle is. Let me show you where they're at. Turn the power off so I can unplug. Right here in the top are two LED lights. Those should both be on if we have 120 volts for each hot leg coming through. That's for your 50 amp outlet. Now, if only one of them is on, that could indicate there's a power issue for the pedestal, your cord, or somewhere in there. Now, I will say, sometimes the lights do just burn out. That's not a 100% indicator, but it's a place to start. If you have 30 amp, there's typically only one light on those plugs because 50 amp has two hot legs and 30 amp has one. Now, if all this checks out right, we have two LED lights on here. Everything seems good. We will plug this back in. I'm not going to turn this on yet. We're going to go inside of the RV. we're going to find our main circuit breaker. So in this RV, it's a 50 amp RV. We will look for the circuit breaker that says 50 on it. If you have a 30 amp RV, you look for a circuit breaker that says 30 on it. And what you're going to do is flip the breaker off and back on. And when you're doing that, if it seems really loose or there's an issue in there, at that point, you might determine there's an issue with that circuit breaker, that someone needs to take a look at it. If you flip it off and back on, everything seems like it's tight and good, then come back out to the RV park. Make sure everything is plugged in tight. Nothing is loose. We didn't have any mishaps plugging things in. Then turn the RV park power back on and see if it was just a loose connection or something in that department. Now we're to the point you might need to call for some help. So if you've determined all of your RV wiring is correct, everything is plugged in correctly, your wiring outlets look good, nothing is burnt, nothing is melted on your RV side, all your breakers are on and they're tight, but you still don't have power, maybe there's an error code on your surge protector, or not all the lights are lit up on your surge protector, that indicates there might be an issue with the RV park pedestal power. Or if you've noticed there's an issue with the outlet that's melted or burnt, you would call the RV park to check it out. But if you plug in and your surge protector has all the proper lights on it, there's no error codes, but there's still no power inside of the RV, there's probably an issue inside of your RV wiring. Could be in a power cord, through the breakers, or somewhere between the campground and your RV. At that point, you'll need to have someone inspect your RV to see what's going on. If you're looking for an RV tech, you can go to rvhelp.com. You can search for vetted RV techs who are near your area who can come out to help you get your RV working. Okay, I had to stand up, get the blood flowing in my legs, and now you're having issues inside of your RV. Let's go through some of those common issues and what the causes might be. If your lights are flickering or they're dim inside of the RV, it could be a simple battery switch is turned off. It could be a bad battery that hasn't been maintained, the water level is low, or the converter could be bad and not charging the battery up fully and the voltage is low inside of the RV. If the converter is not charging the battery, it could be a circuit breaker that's tripped, a bad outlet, a wiring issue feeding power to that converter, or the converter is bad by itself. Now if your outlets are not working but your lights are on, that could be a circuit breaker issue, a GFCI outlet is tripped, or you have a major power issue, there's no power coming to the RV, whether it's from the RV park side or your wiring throughout the RV. Now if your GFCI outlet is tripped, that's something you can easily check and fix. The outlet that you can reset is typically in the bathroom or the kitchen area. On that outlet will be a reset button. When you push the reset button, the button should stay in and the light on that GFCI should turn green. If the button doesn't stay in or the light doesn't turn green, that indicates there's an issue coming to the outlet and it's not getting power to turn on. Now everyone loves it when the CO LP detector beeps in the middle of the night. That could be from low voltage. If your battery is low, and this typically happens when you're not plugged into shore power and you're boondocking overnight and you're running your furnace and the battery drains down, this will beep when the voltage is low in the RV. These also beep when they're expired. So their lifespan on these is 5 years from when they're manufactured. So if they're past that date, they'll start beeping. They also beep when they detect propane gas or CO gas. Now if it is beeping, you want to make sure everyone is safe. So get people outside of the RV, open windows, air things out, and determine why the detector went off. So if it was just low voltage, you can charge your battery. If it's expired, you want to get it replaced as soon as possible. Or if there's a leak or gas inside of the RV, you want to have someone check that out because that is not safe. Now if your air conditioner won't turn on, that could be from your air conditioner breaker that is tripped. So you can go down to the breaker panel box and make sure the breaker is not tripped or flip it off and back on. Sometimes you need to do that. If it won't come on at all, the 12 volts could be low in the RV, which means a low battery. The brains of your air conditioner runs off the battery, and your 120 volt side runs the air conditioner to create the cooling effect. Now if it doesn't work and you've determined your battery has enough voltage and your breaker is not tripped, there could be an issue with the air conditioner itself, possibly the thermostat, control box, capacitor, one of those things. So if it doesn't turn on at all, you might need to call for some RV help. Now let's go through some frequently asked questions about RV electricity, power, and amps. One of the big questions people have is what's the difference between 50 amps and 30 amps? We're going to break that down in a little bit to cover all the details on it, so stay tuned. And the next big question is if I have a 30 amp RV, can I plug into a 50 amp outlet with an adapter to get more power inside of my RV? The short answer to that is no. Now let me show you. This is a 30 amp RV plug. These are some of the examples I have for our classes that we teach. And you can see the size of these wires inside of that plug, or cord I should call it. And this is a 50 amp RV. See the big difference between the size of those wires? So what you're doing when you're plugging a 30 amp plug into a 50 amp outlet is there's no safety restriction because you have 50 amps of potential power going through that 30 amp cord. So picture this like a water hose, and you're shoving all this water down this hose, and you pinch that down and restrict it. It's going to create some heat when you have too much pressure on the smaller hose. Now, yes, there is a 30 amp breaker inside of your RV, which should protect your RV and limit it to 30 amps. But if you're getting more than 30 amps of power by using an adapter outside of your RV, that means your circuit breaker inside of your RV at your breaker panel box is faulty, and now you have more than 30 amps flowing through a wire like this that's only rated for 30 amps. That is a fire hazard waiting to happen. So keep things like for like. So 30 amp RV, plug into a 30 amp pedestal, but sometimes you have a 50 amp RV, you only have a 30 amp pedestal to plug into. That's okay because a 30 amp breaker is smaller than what your 50 amp cord is rated for. So there's only 30 amps maximum going through a cord that's rated for 50 amps. You can use a dog bone adapter, plug your 50 amp RV into that adapter, and then into a 30 amp outlet. Just know your power will be limited inside of the RV because you only have 30 amps to work with. Now I have a whole video on using power adapters to plug your RV in. I'll drop a link to that video in the description of this video. The next question is, can I use a booster pack to get more power inside of my RV? So what they're referring to with that question is using a voltage booster. So Hughes Autoformers, they make one of those, and that is used when you have low voltage coming into your RV to boost the voltage so you're not going to damage things inside of your RV. And what low voltage is your shore power coming in. This typically happens when everyone's air conditioner is running in the middle of summer, later afternoon, the voltage drops down in the park because everyone's using the power throughout that park, and the wiring probably is not quite up to high quality standards in that park. But what you want to see in your voltage is typically 109, 110 is the lowest I want to see voltage. Some things will work down to 103, 104. When it gets lower than that, you're starting to damage things inside of your RV. So that Autoformers voltage booster box brings that low voltage. Let's say it was at 105. It might bring it up to 110, 111 volts. So that brings you up to normal electricity range, so you're not going to damage running things inside of your RV. And another commonly asked question is, why do some RVers buy surge protectors and what do they do? So let's go down here and I'll explain a little bit more. So a surge protector protects your RV against surges. That's the main name of it. And there's different types of surge protectors. There's smart ones and not smart ones. So a smart one will be one like the Watchdog. This has a brain inside of it. It's monitoring the voltage coming in, the amps, looking at the wiring. It's always protecting your RV by looking at all the wiring on it. If you have a surge protector that is not smart, those have some indicator lights on it. So that way when you plug in, you can see what's going on inside of the power pedestal. The wiring should be correct. They're not monitoring voltage or amps or those items. They're just looking at the wiring itself, and they do not shut the power off if there was an issue. Compared to the Watchdog type surge protector, the smart ones that have the EPO, emergency power off, they will shut the power off if your voltage goes too low, too high, the amperage is out of range, the wiring starts melting. It shuts things down before things break inside of the RV. And I have some videos on how these work. I'll put a link down in the description for that. Hold on, I had a quick thought. My neighbor has a not smart surge protector. Let me go over to that and show you what those look like and what the lights mean on it. All right, you see in the top, this has lights on it. This is telling you that power is on, everything is correct. If there was an issue, this is a chart you would follow based on the lights. But you would never know there's an issue inside of your RV unless you're out here looking at the surge protector. So these ones give you some indication, but they're not smart enough to shut it off by themselves. These are basically designed for a major surge. So the surge is when you'd have a lightning storm, the power company has a transformer fail, things like that, where there's a massive amount of power coming to the RV. That's what the surge part stops on these. These don't protect you against the most common issues that normally happen in RVs, like the watchdog does. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to cover the difference between 30 amp and 50 amp power. So looking at the pedestal, we have a 50 amp outlet. There's 4 prongs on here, and a 30 amp outlet has 3 prongs. Now, inside of those 4 prongs, there's 2 hot legs, 1 ground, and 1 neutral. The combination of all of that gives you 50 amps of power on each hot leg for a total of 12,000 watts of power in the 50 amp RV. Now, in the 30 amp RV, we have 3 wires inside of that. So we have 1 hot leg, 1 neutral, and 1 ground. In a 30 amp wire, 120 volts gives you 3,600 watts. Now, the difference between these, as you can see, 50 amp has much thicker wires and more heavy duty. In a 50 amp RV, you can run 4 or more appliances, typically up to 5 or 6. So you can run 2 or 3 air conditioners plus other appliances at the same time in a 50 amp RV. Compared to a 30 amp RV, you're between 2 and 3 appliances, and when you overload the circuit breaker on these, which is very easy to do, you can melt your power plug and then you have to replace it. You can see there's a big difference between 50 amps and 30 amps. I made a guide to help break down the power. You can find that in the description of this video. Alright, now we're to the fun part where the tools come out. So if you made it to this part of the video, you're probably really curious about RV power. Let me show you a few more tips and tricks on checking your power. So to start off with, if your power is not working, things that you can look for to start with, even if you don't have a multimeter, is look at your circuit breaker. Let's say your RV power is plugged in here. You would listen for buzzing noises or feel if the breaker is hot to the touch. If that's the case, that indicates there's a loose connection inside of that circuit breaker, or things are not going to work properly. The breaker is heating up from being overloaded. So at that point, if it was inside of your RV, you can dig deeper into that circuit breaker and determine if there's a loose connection or a bad breaker itself. If you're at the RV park, you're going to have the RV park come take a look at their breaker, because I don't think they would like it if we're digging into their RV pedestal. Now, another thing you can do is you can use a circuit analyzer that plugs into the outlet and it tells you what the voltage or the wiring is doing inside of the outlet. I don't have one of those, so you see it up on the screen. Basically, what those are is a not smart surge protector. They're just telling you what's going on without using a multimeter to check it. Now we're to the fun part, using a multimeter to test the power inside of your pedestal. Now, if you're not sure how to use a multimeter, I have a video showing you the basics and how this works. If you want to dive deeper, I have a full course breaking down using a multimeter and troubleshooting in the RV. That course is linked down in the description. So to start off with, our multimeter is set to volts AC. Flip that over here. You do need to have the power on to test it. So let's turn on the 50 and 30 amp breaker. And our multimeter has 2 leads. This is where we'll test the power. Looking at our 30 amp plug first, we have 2 slots on there. Looking at this, your bottom left is going to be your hot, and your bottom right will be your neutral, and the top round one up here is for your ground. The center here, that's for a screw hole. Nothing goes inside of there. Now keep in mind, when you're using these, keep your fingers back behind this little step in the leads, because this metal prong up here is touching live electricity. So I'm going to take the red lead, put it into the left hot slot, and put the black lead into the right neutral slot, and read our meter. We should be around 120 volts. Sometimes, if you don't quite get there, that means you're not touching the metal properly, so wiggle it around, make sure you're touching the metal securely inside of the plug. So that's reading good voltage. Now I'll check from the hot bottom left to the ground in the top. So again, I'll put my red lead in hot, my black lead to ground. Should be around 120 volts, just like the neutral. So the next check to test on here is from neutral in the bottom right to ground in the top. This should be 0 or pretty close to 0. So that is good. So we're right around 0, that's good. Now you do see on the meter, decimal points behind there are just decimal points. In front of that, that's where I was reading the 0. Now, if we had a bad ground in this situation, we would not have voltage from our hot to our ground, so that would be bad. If we had reverse polarity, as we'll call it, or reverse wiring, that would mean we had power from our neutral to our ground. That would be bad. So looking at the plug this direction, make sure you have hot, neutral, and ground. Now switch over to our 50 amp side. So on your 50 amp plug, we have two hot legs that are right and left. So hot leg here, hot leg over here, and at the bottom is our neutral, and the top round is our ground, just like our 30 amp was. Now we'll use our multimeter. We'll test power in our 50 amp. And on AC power, it really doesn't matter if you put red and hot, black and hot, back and forth. You'll get the same reading on your meter. The only time it really makes a difference is when you're using this leads on DC power. So I'm going to take my red lead, put it into my right hot leg, my black lead into my left hot leg. Doing this, I should read around 240 volts. So that is good. Now I'll put my red lead into my hot lead on the right and my black lead into neutral on the bottom. And you should see 120 volts. So we're good there. Now we'll test our neutral to our left hot leg. So black again on the bottom to neutral, red into the left hot leg. We're at 120 volts. Now if we do the same thing to our ground, so ground on the top, hot leg on the left, we should read 120. And our hot leg on the right, to ground on the top, should again read 120. Now we're going to check between our ground at the top and our neutral. This should be 0 again. Okay, so the voltage is correct. Now if we had improper wiring or loose breakers, we might see voltage that does not read 120. If you're checking between your hots and your neutrals, and you see one side at 280 and the other side at 80, so that means there's a loose neutral inside of that plug somewhere. Don't plug into that. You do want to see around the 240 between your two hot legs on 50 amp and around 120 on your other readings going around, and 0 between neutral and your ground. Now all of our voltage was correct. I'll get this out of the way so I can point. Now we had 240 volts between our two hot legs, so the right and left was 240. Between our hot and neutrals, so hot on the left to neutral here was 120. Our hot on the right to neutral here was 120. And with our ground, between hot to ground was 120. And the other hot to ground was 120. And then our ground to neutral is 0. That is all correct. Same thing on our 30 amp side. Between our hot to neutral was 120. Our hot to ground was 120. And our ground to neutral is 0. You do not want to see 240 volts on a 30 amp side. That will blow things out inside of your RV. That means the plug is not wired properly. It typically happens inside of people's garages when they plug in outlets. The other thing you don't want to see is not around 120 volts. So let's say to our 50 amp plug, if we measured between hot and neutral on one side, or let me say 180 volts between your hot and neutral, and the other side read 80 volts between your hot and neutral, that means you have a neutral issue inside of there. It needs to be checked out. That is not safe power for your RV. And to answer a commonly asked question and how to test for an open ground, we're looking at the 50 amp side. If we read 0 volts between our hot and ground on either side, that means we have a bad ground connection inside of there. Just like on a 30 amp side, if between our hot and ground we read 0 volts, that means there's a bad ground connection somewhere behind this plug and outlet. At that point, you want someone who can work on that to come out and take care of that outlet issue. Okay, and as a reminder, you would call the RV park for help if you determine something is wrong at the RV park power pedestal breakers. But if all that is correct and something's not working inside of your RV between the power pedestal and what you're trying to use inside of the RV, whether it's lights not working, outlets not working, something wrong in the power cord, if you need RV help, that's when you call an RV tech. You can go to rvhelp.com to find a tech near you. Now, as I mentioned throughout the video, there's links linked in the description. Make sure you check those out. There's tons of resources down there. You can also go to the RV education page on my website, and while you're there, you can sign up for weekly emails to get bite-sized tips delivered right to your inbox so you can learn more about RV repair and maintenance. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next video. Have fun at the campsite.